Welcome to the audio adaptation of William Z. Foster's The Crisis in the Socialist Party. Chapter 2: A Generation of Reformism and Its Disastrous Effects. 1. The Socialist Party's Failure to Assume Mass Leadership. Now, let us look briefly at the record of the Socialist Party and see concretely how it has persistently and flagrantly violated the two main essentials of the Marxian class struggle policy necessary for the building of a revolutionary party in the specific American conditions, namely, the development of the party as the actual leader of the masses in the daily struggle and cultivation of Marxian principles among the party membership and mass following. We will take up the former essential first. Our summary of the Socialist Party's experiences in this connection makes no pretense at being a complete history of the party. All it does is to indicate some of the main opportunist errors of the party and foundation of the party in 1901 down to the Socialist Party Convention of 1934. As for the present tendencies of the Socialist Party, I shall discuss them later in another chapter. A. Passivity in strikes and other struggles. When the Socialist Party was formed, the trade unions were already in the hands of the Gompers machine. The reactionary trade leaders did not carry on campaign to organize the masses of unorganized, but instead confined their efforts chiefly to a narrow fringe of skilled workers. Many of these leaders were slothful, inefficient, self-seeking, corrupt, and tied up with all kinds of capitalist organizations. They were open defenders of the capitalist system, worked hand in glove with the two capitalist parties, and generally acted as a brake upon the development of the workers' struggles. In such a situation, it was manifestly the task and duty of the Socialist Party to do everything within its power to stimulate and give political leadership to the immediate struggles of the party, of the workers, particularly on the trade union field. This does not mean the Socialist Party should have undertaken to take place of the trade unions, but it should have sought to invigorate them, to extend their strikes, to strengthen their organization campaigns, and generally to give practical leadership to their struggle as against the reactionary policies of the Gompers machine. This aggressive policy offered a high road to effective mass leadership of the party. But such a course was alien to the nature and policies of the socialist petty bourgeois leaders. They neither saw the historic task before the party nor had the impulse to carry it out. They conceived the party principally to be a propaganda organization, a movement to further their conceptions of public ownership and moderate legislative reform, as well as conduct occasional election campaigns. They did not militantly lead the struggling workers. Since its foundation, the Communist Party has shown how a party should give the lead to trade unions and unorganized masses. Time and time again, it has mobilized its organizers and financial resources to support and strengthen trade union and other struggles. Many examples of this might be cited, such as the placing of some 20 paid organizers in the Pittsburgh area during the 1927 coal strike, the maintenance of many organizers during various Labor Party campaigns, the extensive organization of crews built up during the big unemployment struggle of 1930 through 1934, and the financing of various United Front conferences, etc. But this active and leading organization work was practically unknown to the petty bourgeois leaders of the Socialist Party. Where any such work was done, it was almost always under the direct initiative of the left wing. It is true that the individual leaders, controlled by socialists and other minorities of the socialists within various organizations, outlined active organization campaigns and strike work, but this was largely spontaneous. The party was, as a whole, did not follow any such general policy. Its essential attitude was that of a bystander, commentator, and educational force, rather than the militant, actual leader of the workers' daily struggle for their burning economic and political demands. Illustrations of the Socialist Party passivity should be cited, if space permitted, from many important strike struggles, organization campaigns, etc., throughout the many years of the party's existence. But the Socialist Party's attitude during the many great labor defense cases that came up from time to time serves to exemplify its non-militant relation towards the class struggle. In the Moyer, Haywood, Pettibone case in 1907, the left wing of the party gave active support, but the right wing, instinctively sensing the militant revolutionist Haywood as an enemy, sabotaged the fight. In the McNamara case in 1911, the Socialist Party leaders, jointly with the American Federation of Labor, gave a certain support until the brave fighters, badly advised, pleaded guilty in an effort to save the trade unions and their leaders from persecution. Whereupon the Socialist Party, like the American Federation of Labor, abandoned them completely and has never done a thing to help them since. Although McNamara and Schmidt are all still in jail after 25 years. In the McBooney, Billings, and Saccovasetti cases of later years, it was the anarchists, syndicalists, communists, and farmer laborites who took the lead in the fight, with the Socialist Party trailing along in the rear. And in the recent Scottsboro case, it was the Communist Party that leaped quickly in the defense of the condemned 9 Negro boys, and by its swift action undoubtedly saved them from electrocution, while the Socialist Party only joined the struggle in later stages, and then lamely and formally. This traditional passive attitude of the Socialist Party towards the daily class struggles of the workers, the tendency to tail after the masses, to preach at them rather than to stand militantly at the head on every battle, cost the Socialist Party much possible mass support and leadership. It was one of the major reasons why the Socialist Party never succeeded in actually being accepted as the fighting party of the proletariat of this country. B. Contradictory industrial union policy. One of the great mistakes also of the Socialist Party over many years was its opportunist handling of the vital question of industrial unionism. Even before 1900, the more progressive elements among the workers realized that the craft unions, because of specialization and trustification in industry, had become obsolete, and that a system of industrial unionism was imperatively necessary. All sections of the revolutionary movement became impregnated with industrial union sentiment. With the issue of industrial unionism was bound up with the whole question of the organization of the unorganized, honest leadership, militant policy, etc. It was the historic task of the Socialist Party to give clear direction and active leadership to the industrial union movement, but it failed dismally in this obligation. It is true the party declared equivocally for the principle of industrial unionism, but it never told the workers clearly how to bring about industrial unionism, nor did it give unified leadership to the movement. The party was divided for 15 years into two sections over this fundamental question. The right wing worked mildly within the AFL with the principle of industrial or organization through amalgamation, but always ready to make an opportunist maneuver on the question with the Gompers machine. On the other hand, the revolutionary left wing of the party, outraged by corrupt regime of the AFL, directed its efforts in the main towards the realization of industrial unionism through the correct policy of breaking dual unions, that is, industrial unions independent of the AFL. The outstanding example of such dual industrial unions was the Industrial Workers of the World, which was launched in 1905. Manifestly, in this situation, it was the definite responsibility of the party to liquidate by educational means and firm direction, this glaring contradiction in policy within its ranks to concentrate all party forces upon a militant struggle within the trade unions for industrial unionism. But the petty bourgeois Socialist Party leaders did not want any active fight for industrial unionism inside of the AFL or outside either. They never wanted to fight the AFL leaders aggressively on back issues. They were quite content to have the confused situation drag along as it was. So, over many years, they straddled the question, and the right wing continued its opportunist line in the AFL. While the left wing frittered away its strength in dual unionism, the typical opportunist policy on this vital issue was expressed in 1912 when the Socialist Party convention endorsed the principle of industrial unionism, but did not state whether this was to be brought to realization through the transformation of the old unions or by building up the IWW and similar industrial organizations. It was not until after the organization of the Communist Party in 1919, and especially under the influence of the writings of Lenin on the question of work within the old trade unions, that revolutionary movement in the United States liquidated its traditional dual union tendencies and worked out a militant campaign in the AFL for industrial unionism, a campaign that eventually took organized shape in the Trade Union Educational League. The general consequence of the Socialist Party's whole opportunist handling of the industrial union question vastly reduced the effectiveness of the party's industrial union campaign in general. The work of one wing of the party was antagonistic to that of the other, and because of this doubly wrong policy of the Socialist Party as a whole lost its opportunity to secure real leadership of the masses on this fundamental question. C. Anti-Labor Party tendency. Another disastrous error of the Socialist Party is in pre-war days was its opposition in principle to the formation of the Labor Party. This was a mistake also shared by the left wing for ultra-left reasons. It is a well-known fact that in those countries where, because of specific national conditions, the trade unions were organized before the Socialist Parties took shape, the workers' first steps into independent political action were in the form of organizing labor parties based directly on the trade unions. This was notably the case in Great Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. The United States belonged to this category of countries. Here, because of the factors already pointed out, the political development of the workers has been delayed, but they had succeeded in building trade unions. The consequence was that when the workers began to feel the necessity for organized class political action, their necessity was to do as the workers in Great Britain had done by developing a political organization, a labor party directly out of the unions. But the American Socialist Party leaders never understood this elementary fact. They resisted the natural trend of the workers to form a labor party. They tried mechanically to apply the United States a policy which was adapted to Germany, Austria, and old Russia, where the Socialist Party, either growing before or simultaneously with the trade unions, naturally became looked upon by the workers as the party of the working class. Thus, instead of helping the workers to take their first steps in political action through a mass labor party, the Socialist Party for many years sought to kill the Labor Party tendency by insisting upon American workers accepting the Socialist Party as their mass party. Instead of being its greatest champion as it should, the Socialist Party traditionally looked upon the Labor Party as a rival and fought against it. Harry W. Ladler said, the formation of these parties, local labor parties, in various parts of the country brought a new competitor into a field against the Socialist Party. Robert Hunter, the Socialist Party's early expert on the Labor Party, said the Socialist Party is a labor party and all needs is the united support of all American organizations. He believed that to build a labor party apart from the Socialist Party would be about as foolish as a thing as to scrap the machinery of the AFL and to form a new trade union movement. It was only in 1921 when the Socialist Party, with but a handful of members and with its anti-labor policy clearly bankrupt, finally had to yield to the inevitable and endorsed principle, the organization of a labor party, but it never became reconciled to this perspective. It refused to join with the Chicago Federation of Labor, the Communist Party, and other left organizations in 1923 in a real fight for the Labor Party. It has never made an active campaign for the Labor Party. Even today, it is passive upon this whole question, and still has the lingering feeling that the Labor Party is its rival. The Socialist Party and the working class paid high for this long-continued anti-labor tendency. The Socialist resistance to the naturally and spontaneously growing Labor Party definitely hindered the political development of the working class. It checked the growth of the Labor Party sentiment in the trade unions. It made it easier for Gomper's machine to keep the masses tied to the old parties. Furthermore, with its wrong policy, the Socialist Party gave up perhaps the best weapon it ever had with which to fight the Gomper's machine, the issue of the Labor Party. It was a sacrifice the opportunist leaders could easily make, however, in their eagerness to be on good terms with the Gomper's regime. The general consequence was that the Socialist Party badly failed to give leadership to workers in vital question of the development of their mass political consciousness and organization, and in the Socialist Party itself, a result paid dearly in loss of potential membership and influence. D. Another disastrous reformist tendency that prevailed all through the new life of the Socialist Party down to the advent of the present new leadership was the so-called attitude of neutrality towards the trade unions. In substance, the policy constituted a failure to put forward the party policy militantly in the trade unions. It was a refusal to take up the cudgels of the necessary active fight against the corrupt Gomper's Green leadership to win the masses for socialism. W.J. Gent, expressing many party decisions, defended this opportunist policy on the basis that the party does not seek to dictate to organized labor in matters of internal organization and policy. It is clear that for socialism to make headway in the working class, especially in the trade union member movement, the Socialist Party had to come to head-on collision with the reactionary trade union leadership. It was not a question of dictation to the unions, but of a positive assertion of the party policy. But the doctors, lawyers, preachers, journalists, etc., who led the Socialist Party wanted no such fight. In many instances, in the trade unions, the left party elements, notably such men as Duncan MacDonald of the Illinois Miners, made a militant fight against Gompers. But this was not the true policy of the party leadership. They wanted to cooperate with the Gompersites, not fight them. Such a struggle as made later over many years by the Trade Union Educational League, or such a determined stand as that now being taken by John L. Lewis in the Committee for Industrial Organization against the trade union bureaucracy, was quite foreign to the whole conception of the opportunist Socialist Party leaders. They seldom got beyond the stage of shadowboxing with their reactionaries. In fact, the Socialist Party leaders' real tendency was to collaborate and amalgamate with Gomper's regime. If they did not actually consolidate the force of the green ruling bureaucracy sooner, it was primarily because of the pressure of the large and militant left wing in the party. However, after the big split in 1919, which took over the whole left wing of the party, the petty bourgeois leadership, with no militants to restrain them, proceeded to drop all opposition to Gompers and to identify themselves almost completely with the reactionary ruling trade union clique, says D.J. Suppose, dealing with this period. This new political alignment of the socialists with the administration forces marks the end of the leadership in the opposition in the labor movement. They have abandoned the roles of initiators of new issues for the labor movement. They are no longer the center of aggressive opposition. In the political activities, the Socialist Party has followed a course similar to that of the Socialist Trade Unionists. It has ceased attacking the conservative unions and leaders." End quote. This traditional policy of the Socialist Party leadership to temporize and compromise of the reactionary American Federation of Labor officialdom was disastrous to the development of the Socialist Party as the whole real leading force in the labor movement. The only way the Socialist Party could have come forward as the vanguard of the working class was by a policy of sustained militant struggle on all fronts against the Gompers regime, and in this it failed dismally. In summing up the general situation during the pre-war period, it can be safely said that the Socialist Party had carried on a policy of class struggle. As indicated in the foregoing, it could have defeated the Gompers regime and given trade union movement a socialist leadership. In those days, the Gompers machine was not so deeply entrenched. Trade union democracy was much more prevalent. Red baiting was not so effective, for the reactionaries then only deemed the revolution pretty much as an abstraction, and a well-directed fight could have upset the old leadership. Even as it was, with all the wishy-washy opportunist policies of the Socialist Party, passivity in strikes, organization campaigns, labor defenses cases, etc., it confused industrial union policy, its anti-labor party program, its weak fight against Gompers, etc., etc. The socialist forces made distinct headway in the unions. In 1912, they controlled such organizations as the brewery workers, bakery workers, shingle weavers, cap makers, painters, Western Federation of Miners, machinists, fur workers, journeymen, tailors, lady garment workers, coal miners, etc. They all controlled many central labor unions and large numbers of local unions, as well as strong minorities in the printers, cigar makers, and almost every other labor organization. In 1912, the American Federation of Labor Convention, the socialist candidate President Hayes polled 5,073 votes against Gompers. A determined policy on the part of the Socialist Party leadership would have soon carried the majority of the trade union movement, but such a policy was not applied, and to make matters worse, the petty bourgeois leadership of the Socialist Party proceeded to smash completely the hopes of the socialist forces winning the trade union leadership by driving thousands of the best proletarian elements out of the party during the big party split of 1912, of which I shall speak further along. E. Opportunist war policy. The World War presented a golden opportunity to the Socialist Party to develop its strength in mass leadership, but it fumbled the whole matter and failed to organize the masses effectively for anti-war struggle. There was undoubtedly a huge sentiment among the broad ranks of the people against America's entry into the war. This was demonstrated, among other things, by the election of Wilson on his anti-intervention program, and also by the total immediate failure of the volunteer system to recruit soldiers for the war. Not only did the situation offer a splendid opportunity for mass anti-war work, but this was also the central revolutionary task at the time. But the reformist-led Socialist Party proved incapable of rising to the occasion. It did not develop a definite and well-organized mass struggle against the war. True enough, the left wing, led by Debs and Ruthenberg, did succeed in putting the party on record against the war and developing considerable anti-war agitation, even though this was somewhat of a pacifist type and not a real Bolshevik anti-war policy aiming at transforming the war into a revolutionary struggle against capitalism. The right wing, however, took an equivocal position towards the war. Many of the petty bourgeois leaders, Russell, Walling, Spargo, Simons, Stokes, Ghent, etc., split away from the party on a pro-war program. The rest dilly-dallied with the question and, in effect, sabotaged the party's anti-war resolution, so that there was no real crystallization of the party's forces to mobilize the masses against the war, no serious attempt to win the trade unions to an anti-war position, no organization of anti-war strikes, etc. The general result was that instead of making the huge gains that they should have made, the Socialist Party, because of its facilitating opportunist policy on the war, only made a relatively moderate membership increase in the war years, and this advance was more than offset by a disastrous sharpening of the struggle between the right and left wings in the party over the reformist leadership opportunist wartime policies, and also by serious losses of position and control in the trade unions. During the war, the Socialist Party paid heavily for its long years of wrong trade union policy because the Socialist Party had not entrenched itself in the unions in former times by militant struggle based on sound principles. The Gompers clique was in firm command at the crucial moment and was able to use its official control with telling effect to swing the trade unions to a pro-war position. Thus, it largely isolated the Socialist Party and crippled the whole anti-war struggle. The Socialist Party reformist leaders muffed the war situation almost completely, what should have been resulted in a great victory for the party. They eventually turned into a serious defeat. E. Opportunist war policy. The World War presented a golden opportunity to the Socialist Party to develop its strength in mass leadership, but it fumbled the whole matter and failed to organize the masses effectively for anti-war struggle. There was undoubtedly a huge sentiment among the broad ranks of the people against America's entry into the war. This was demonstrated, among other things, by the election of Wilson on his anti-intervention program, and also by the total immediate failure of the volunteer system to recruit soldiers for the war. Not only did the situation offer a splendid opportunity for mass anti-war work, but this was also the central revolutionary task at the time. But the reformist-led Socialist Party proved incapable of rising to the occasion. It did not develop a definite and well-organized mass struggle against the war. True enough, the left wing, led by Debs and Ruthenberg, did succeed in putting the party on record against the war and developing considerable anti-war agitation, even though this was somewhat of a pacifist type and not a real Bolshevik anti-war policy aiming at transforming the war into a revolutionary struggle against capitalism. The right wing, however, took an equivocal position towards the war. Many of the petty bourgeois leaders, Russell, Walling, Spargo, Simons, Stokes, Ghent, etc., split away from the party on a pro-war program. The rest dilly-dallied with the question and, in effect, sabotaged the party's anti-war resolution, so that there was no real crystallization of the party's forces to mobilize the masses against the war, no serious attempt to win the trade unions to an anti-war position, no organization of anti-war strikes, etc. The general result was that instead of making the huge gains that they should have made, the Socialist Party, because of its facilitating opportunist policy on the war, only made a relatively moderate membership increase in the war years, and this advance was more than offset by a disastrous sharpening of the struggle between the right and left wings in the party over the reformist leadership opportunist wartime policies, and also by serious losses of position and control in the trade unions. During the war, the Socialist Party paid heavily for its long years of wrong trade union policy because the Socialist Party had not entrenched itself in the unions in former times by militant struggle based on sound principles. The Gompers clique was in firm command at the crucial moment and was able to use its official control with telling effect to swing the trade unions to a pro-war position. Thus, it largely isolated the Socialist Party and crippled the whole anti-war struggle. The Socialist Party reformist leaders muffed the war situation almost completely, what should have been resulted in a great victory for the party. They eventually turned into a serious defeat. F. Sabotaging the Russian Revolution. A deadly, disastrous sin of the reformist petty bourgeois leadership of the Socialist Party against the working class and the Socialist Party was its hostile attitude towards the Bolshevik Russian Revolution. Perhaps nothing in its whole history of the Socialist Party did more to destroy the party's internal unity, prevent its growth, and kill the mass influence than the bitter warfare that the professors, preachers, lawyers, and similar non-proletarian elements running the Socialist Party directed for many years against the Soviet government. The advent of the October Revolution presented an unequaled opportunity for the Socialist Party to educate and organize the masses. Here, at last, was the much dreamt of, long-planned socialism come into being after a glorious victory over Russian Tsarism, and capitalism. The revolution taught 1,000 vital lessons in proletarian theory, strategy, and tactics. The heroism of its fighters was an inspiration to the toiling masses of the world. It gave the first real ray of hope to the oppressed in all countries. What a tremendous opportunity for the Socialist Party to build itself by using the great world-shaking event for the furtherance of socialist cause in the United States. And together with this immense propaganda value of the Russian Revolution to the Socialist Party, there was also the duty-bound revolutionary task upon the soldiers of the Socialist Party to use all its power to organize the masses to defend the newly formed Soviet government and attacked on all sides as it was by capitalist forces. During all the years of its existence, it had been one of the strongest factors in the growth of the Communist Party, that it has fully understood the revolutionary significance of the Soviet government and thoroughly appreciated the opportunities and revolutionary duties connected therewith, but not so in the Socialist Party. Its petty bourgeois leaders were not revolutionists. They did not want to destroy capitalism, but to reform it. The Russian Revolution was a thing alien and hostile to them. The overthrow of capitalism in Russia in October 1917 was against their plan of gradually transforming society from capitalism to socialism. So instead of supporting the Soviet government as all true revolutionists must, they viewed it with hatred and spared no words in denouncing it. And all this was in line with their antagonistic position assumed towards the Soviets by the Second Internationale. Throughout the life of the Russian Revolution, the American socialist press has reeked with anti-Soviet attacks, even though the Socialist Party has grudgingly endorsed the Soviet government because of mass pressure. Hilkett clearly expressed the general attitude of his co-middle class leaders when he declared, in a spirit of thorough hostility, quote, "The Soviet government has been the greatest disaster and calamity has ever occurred to the socialist movement. Let us disassociate ourselves from the Soviet government," close end quote. Every slander against the USSR sent forth by bourgeois enemies was picked up, repeated, and enlarged upon in the socialist press. The party leaders accused the Soviet government of red imperialism, of starving and oppressing the masses, of betraying the socialist cause. Norman Thomas characteristically added his voice to the deplorable anti-Soviet chorus when he said, quote, "One thing, however, is certain. The Russian government rules by tyranny and terror, with secret police, espionage, and arbitrary executions." End quote. Gompers, Wall, and Green did not outdo the socialist leaders in vicious and anti-Soviet attacks, and as for Hearst, he copied many of his worst slanders from the columns of the Jewish Socialist Forward. The Socialist Party heroized the Menshevik counter-revolutionary Abramovich when he came to the United States, and the bourgeois world applauded the shameful spectacle of Hilkett, leader of the Socialist Party, acting as an attorney for former Russian capitalist oil interests in the American courts in an effort to force the Soviet government to return their confiscated property. Of all the non-revolutionary policies in the history of the Socialist Party, petty bourgeois leaders, their anti-Soviet line was the worst and most destructive to the health, growth, and mass leadership of the Socialist Party. It was the poisoned fruit of many years of reformism and all the putrid rottenness. It worked profoundly to undermine the integrity of the Socialist Party, to alienate it from the best fighting elements in the working class, and to weaken its mass influence generally. The enmity towards the USSR had a powerful effect in driving still deeper the wedge separating the Socialist and Communist parties, although which has suffered in the past 15 years. The anti-Soviet policy of the Socialist Party leaders was an aid and comfort to the capitalist enemies of the revolution, and it showed conclusively that these petty bourgeois opportunists never could build the Socialist Party into a powerful revolutionary mass party. G. Neck deep in class collaboration. After the World War, the American big capitalists initiated their notorious movement for speeding up the workers. It was the period of the great rationalization of industry. New methods of driving the workers were introduced on all sides, and the toilers' productivity swiftly increased. To secure some pretense of consent of the workers to the inhuman speed-up, all sorts of welfare systems, bonus plans, old age pensions, and the like were established. Besides this, illusions were intensively cultivated far and wide among the workers by Carver, Gillette, and many others to the effect that through the newfangled employee stock ownership plans, they were actually buying control of the industries and were on the high road to some sort of collective commonwealth. This speed-up movement raged nearly all through the Coolidge prosperity period from about 1922 to 1929. It spread the unorganized as well as organized industries. It vastly increased the exploitation of workers and brought fresh billions into the coffers of money-drunk capitalists. The top of the AFL leaders, true to their reactionary role, fitted themselves into this whole speed-up program. They declared that strikes and class struggle were obsolete, and the way of the workers to prosperity now lay through cooperation with the bosses to increase production, of which the workers were somehow to get an increased share. The AFL leaders adopted the whole speed-up system under the euphonious phrases of the New Wage Plan and the higher strategy of labor. They hired efficiency engineers for the unions and set up a B&O plan for other forms of union management and cooperation to apply the boss's speed up. As a result of this monstrous class collaboration policy of the AFL, leaders introduced unions to semi-company union status to mere appendages of the employees' production schemes. The workers' hard-won working conditions were ruthlessly sacrificed. In consequence, the unions declined steadily in membership and fighting spirit. For the first time in history, they did not grow during a period of economic expansion. The whole trade union movement was afflicted with dry rot. As befitted revolutionary organizations, the Communist Party and the trade union educational elite fought uncompromisingly against the whole speed-up development. The Communists raised the question to every trade union. They announced the B&O plan as disastrous to the trade unions and the interests of workers. They exposed the many illusions that were being built up around employee stock buying, labor banking, etc. They demanded a fighting class struggle policy, and in making this fight, the communists had to face wholesale expulsion and discharge from industry and labor unions all over the country, for the combined employers and reactionary trade union leaders proceeded to extremes to break up all opposition to their class collaboration program. Never in the history of the American labor movement was trade union democracy at such a low ebb. The brave fight it made in these times was one of the best pages of life of the Communist Party. How did the Socialist Party meet its revolutionary duty in this critical situation, when the masses needed correct leadership so acutely? As usual, it did not rise to the occasion. On the contrary, the socialist trade union leaders everywhere identified themselves almost completely with green leadership. This was the period cited by Seppos above, when the Socialist Party leaders ceased to be the trade union opposition. They became ardent supporters and theorizers of the new wage policy and the higher strategy of labor. They condemned strikes as entirely out of date. In no industry did class collaboration reach greater heights than in the socialist-controlled needle trades, and nowhere was the expulsion policy so ruthlessly applied against the militant left-wing elements who were fighting to keep the trade unions from being used as tools to increase the exploitation of the working class. The Socialist Party made no fight whatever against the infamous B&O plan, union management cooperation, the new wage policy, and all the rest of it. This is not surprising, because the whole Second Internationale had become greatly enthused over the speed-up movement, helped the bosses to introduce it in Europe, and hailed it over as the broad way to socialism, spinning fancy theories about an organized capitalism, super-imperialism, and long period of peaceful capitalist expansion ahead. They outdid even the hectic American capitalist theorists of the rationalization of the industry movement. In 1925, when the Communist Party was fighting against union management cooperation through the trade union movement, Norman Thomas, in his booklet, What is Industrial Democracy?, gave his blessings to the B&O speed-up plan in the following words, quote, "The railroad management, in return for improved standards of shop production, is doing its utmost to keep the men supplied with work so that the men gain, not lose, by efficiency. The plan seems to be working well." End quote. The American Socialist Party naturally suffers severely from its tailing after the bourgeoisie in this situation. It became afflicted with the dry rot that had infected the trade union movement generally, except the Socialist Party got it worse. The party sank to the lowest stage in all of its career, both ideologically and organizationally. By 1929 had remained only about 7,500 members, and its revolutionary spirit had dropped to the correspondingly low levels. This was a generally unlovingly period of the party's support to La Follette's candidacy, the removal of the class struggle clause from the Socialist Party membership application card, the agitation of Norman Thomas, the change the name of the party, etc. In short, the Socialist Party was on the very brink of bankruptcy. The party was harvesting in full the bitter crop of many long years of opportunist petty bourgeois leadership. H. Socialist Party inertia in the crisis. When the great economic crash came in 1929, the employers, with the Hoover government their willing tool, proceeded to slash the wages of the employed and to force the millions of unemployed to starve. It is a notorious fact that the AFL leaders took no real action against this brutal course. On the contrary, they objectively aided the employers by viciously fighting against unemployment insurance and support of Hoover's stagger system, and by signing the infamous Hoover No Strike No Wage Cut Agreement, which enabled the bosses freely to slash wages. And for all of this, they were duly praised by the capitalist press. The Communist Party, on the other hand, militantly took up the fight for the unemployed and employed workers. Beginning with the famous March 6, 1930 national demonstration of the 1.2 million unemployed, it carried on during the next 3 years a most aggressive struggle for and with the unemployed all over the country. It organized hundreds of local and state mass hunger marches and other demonstrations. It carried out several national conventions and marches on Washington. During these bitter fights, the Communist Party and its following faced violent attacks from the police. Hundreds were clubbed and jailed, and many were killed in the demonstrations. The general effect of the big mass struggle under the communist leadership was to make unemployment insurance and relief real issues in this country and to force many important relief concessions from the employers. It also laid a strong foundation for the Communist Party among the masses. And what was the Socialist Party doing in these crucial early years of the crisis? Practically nothing to organize the unemployed masses for struggle. It was still paralyzed from its former orgy of class collaboration. While the Communist Party was on the firing line with huge demonstrations and other struggles, we find Norman Thomas and J.P. Morgan jointly supporting over the radio the useless blockade system. The Socialist Party, it is true, talked a great deal in these years of unemployment relief and insurance, but it did not go out and fight for them. It was only after the Communist Party had long taken the lead in the struggle, and especially after the new left elements began to develop in the Socialist Party, that the party slowly started to play a role in the struggle of the unemployed. When the Great Strike movement began under Roosevelt's regime early in 1933, again, the Socialist Party could not rise to the situation and give the awakening masses effective leadership. Manifestly, it was the task of every revolutionary organization to do all possible, as the Communist Party did, to stimulate and lead the unemployed workers, in this, the first real attack they had made against the oppressors for a dozen years. But the Socialist Party was incapable of giving such aggressive leadership. Instead, its leader, Norman Thomas, who in 1933 had complained about the docility of labor and who now was filled with illusions about Roosevelt's socialism, actually tried to put a damper on the struggle by telling the workers that the strikes are inadvisable at the present time. But the workers paid no attention to Thomas's opportunism, no more than they did the similar advice of William Greene, but went militantly ahead with the development of their enormous strike movement. Thus, once more, the Socialist Party, moved by reformist considerations, dilly-dallied with a crucial situation and failed to give the masses the necessary class struggle leadership. A word in summary. In this section, I have shown that historically the Socialist Party has consistently violated the first fundamental of the class struggle policy, namely, the necessity of coming forward aggressively as the champion of the masses in their daily fights for urgent economic and political demands. Instead of fulfilling this imperative necessity, the whole history of the Socialist Party is an abdication of such mass leadership. The illustrations cited, the Socialist Party's traditionally massive attitude towards strikes and organization campaigns, its long-continued contradictory industrial union policy, its anti-labor party tendency, its opportunist policy of neutrality towards the trade unions, its failure militantly to fight the Commerce Green bureaucracy, its wavering policy during the war, its hostility to the Soviet government, its failure to fight the deadly union management cooperation speed-up movement, and its lethargy in the struggles of the unemployed and employed workers during the early years of the present industrial crisis. All these wrong policies together amply prove that the point that the Socialist Party has failed to give of fighting leadership to the toilers in their situations of deepest need. And to these illustrations, others could be added as, for example, the Socialist Party's complete neglect of the burning Negro question over many years, its opportunistic handling of the youth issue, its haphazard consideration of the problems of women, the foreign-born, etc. The general result of the Socialist Party's traditional flabby, reformist class collaboration policies dictated by its opportunist middle-class leadership has been the Socialist Party could not and did not become a strong mass revolutionary party. Its leaders ducked and evaded and compromised every struggle and issue that the workers were basically interested in. By its weak, opportunist course, the Socialist Party was unable to defeat its powerful capitalist enemies and their labor leader henchmen. Hence, it did not secure the leadership of the masses and become their accepted revolutionary party. This could be no other outcome of the Socialist Party's long record of opportunist vacillations and abdication of leadership in the class struggle than the party's present crisis, an obvious failure.